All right, Sean Lewis, welcome to Isekai Convention. We appreciate you coming out. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. A little bit about myself. I am a former, I guess, sometimes current playwright. I did my first comic at Image in 2015, a book called Saints, and then since then I've done The Few with Hayden Sherman, Coyotes with Caitlin Yarsky, Thumbs with Hayden Sherman, and now I'm about to do Bliss again with Caitlin Yarsky. I like to only work with the same two people forever, basically.
Well, that actually is pretty cool because, like, we've been talking to some other people, and I'm going to come back to that. But the first thing we want to ask you is about what brought you to storytelling.
Sure. Um, man, that's a tough question. I don't know. I was always obsessed with stories. I think man, I don't know. I was a fat, unpopular kid. I think at that point, all you kind of have is stories. And I also I just remember there were whenever I was in English class, I would get out of projects by doing short stories. Like we'd have to do a book report or we'd have to do I remember very specifically there was a point we had to do a book report and I didn't read the book. And instead I went off and kind of wrote my own short story. And I said I took a minor character that was in parts of the book I read and I wrote a short story from their perspective and turned it in. And the teacher lost their mind. And I was like, okay, like my con worked, but you're saying that it was so creative and the story was good. So, I got interested in it from there. And then in high school, there's always drunken parties, and then you would end up at another party weeks later, and people would be like, "Oh, who remembers that thing that happened?" And I would find people volunteering me. Like I was not popular at this point, but I was useful for hey, tell us in a better way what we did. And I would be the one who they'd kind of ask to do that, to be their oral historian. And so it was something I enjoyed and I liked doing. I went to college. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want a real job. I didn't know what you majored in to not have a real job. It sounds like I'm being flipped, but it's pretty accurate. Um, so I took English. I was a general English major, and I just read a lot. And so then I read a lot of. I think I fell in love with reading stories much more then because I was just reading some amazing authors I hadn't been exposed to. And then I left school. By the end of that, I started doing theater and writing plays, and then I went to grad school, and I went to grad school for playwriting and studied some fiction while I was there too. And then it just people started hiring me right out of school to do stuff, not for a lot of money. I don't think anyone's ever hired me for a lot of money, but enough that I was eating. And then it just kind of kept spiraling until it became a job, and then it's bounced around a lot. Like I said, I started out as a playwright, but I've also published a bunch of nonfiction. I've published some fiction. I've had some essays that I've told on This American Life for radio. I've done some film and TV, and now comics. So it's kind of encompassed all different forms of storytelling at this point.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in asking all the creators is about the hero's journey. The Man of a Thousand Faces, the famous book that kind of encompassed all of heroes' journeys. What's your kind of take on your heroes and your in your storytelling?
Um, it's interesting, it's funny because I teach literally classes called storytelling now, at college. And a lot of my students will ask me about that. I'm doing an independent study with one of my students over the summer. Literally, we had a class today, and he was asking me what should I be looking at for structure? Should I look at hero's journey? Because the hero's journey is so when we're talking about Joseph Campbell specifically. I mean, he was a mythologist. He studied myth, and so he would break down how myths and the stories of those myths operated consistently and how they were successful. And so what he did without actually being a writer in the same way as Hemingway or Faulkner, he kind of laid out here's the structure for a larger than life story, right?
Right.
And so it got adopted by Hollywood most completely. I mean, I guess I use it, but I don't. I would feel like a complete fraud going yes, hero's journey is my muse, and I do this or that. I definitely went through a stretch in college where grad school. In grad school, I kept getting notes from people that they were like, your characters are really amazing and your world building is really cool. Like, I want to live in your world. Your plot is a disaster. Like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, it's like I watch it because it's exciting, but by the end, I'm like, wait, what exactly was the story? And so I started getting obsessive about Hero's Journey at that point, just to try and learn more structure. I think in terms of building characters, I don't think about it as much when I'm doing that. I mean, for me, I'm always trying to figure out with a character, like, I mean, there's always a part of me in it. Usually, I usually start from a high concept where I'm like, what's something that I don't understand in the world, or that's most of it. A lot of times, like, I'll be like, what's an issue I don't know what I think about, um, and I'll start writing to try and learn what I think about it. Like, a good example, one of my first plays that was really successful was about prisons, and basically people serving life sentences. And I was like, I don't know what I think about life sentences. I'm a liberal. I think they're bad. But then I would like go out and I'd interview people who had children like killed by people, and I'm like, I think I might be wrong. And then I would go and talk to inmates who are serving a life sentence, and they would be really gracious to me. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. You guys all like, you're making this very hard. And so I would then start to build character out of concept, out of like, what is the thing someone's wrestling with. I mean, I think all stories are basically driven from want. Like, what does the character want to change in order to change his or her or their life? Like, stories are all about change. They're basically about like, I mean, hero's journey specifically, because they're myth, they almost all start with like, I'm weak and cowardly, and I wish that I was greater and more powerful. And my village needs me, and if I don't become more powerful, then my village dies, which means my mom dies, which means my sister dies, which means everyone hates me, which I die. And all of those things, like character, stakes, world, they initially come from just need. Like, I need to change who I am. I need to connect with my world in a new way. Um, so I think that's the thing that's most interesting for me, is I start thinking about a concept, like, what's an issue, a thought, an idea I can't get my head around yet, or I want to explore. And then the very first question I come out of that is I start thinking about a character, and I start going like, what do they want? What do they need? Like, if I'm doing a story about memory, then what is it about memory that they're missing in their life, or that they want to change? If I'm doing a story about toxicity, it's the same thing. I mean, the structures come into that. I think when you write a lot, like I write a lot, um, like it's all I do most of the time. Structure starts to get really, really ingrained. So, like, some of what you're talking about, hero's journey, like, there's a part of me I'm like, well, I don't really follow it. Part of that's because it's also ingrained at this point. Like, I kind of internally know, oh, this is where I'm gonna have to switch to the next scene, and oh, right here is where I need a reversal. And like, just as I'm doing the initial typing, I'll just kind of it just kind of drops in because you get so used to following a driven
Right.
structure. Um, but I think like it's really, really helpful. I mean, you can kind of be not great at almost all other things besides plot, but if you're really good at plot and structure, you can still get work.
Right.
Like, you can kind of suck at doing dialogue or characters, but like, if you can spin a good structural yarn that surprises me at the end, and I feel like I went on a journey, you're gonna get hired to do things.
Yeah.
You could be amazing at character. Like, you can write amazing characters, but who people are like, I've never seen anyone like this, and they're so funny and cool and interesting. What do they do? But if the answer to like, what do they do is I don't know, people are like, I have no interest in the rest of your story. Um, so it's funny. I kind of had to teach myself the back way, because I think I was the guy for a long time who was like, the characters, they're really cool and interesting. The world is really amazing. Your dialogue really good. What the hell is happening? you know. Um, so I think like it. I mean, plot and structure are they're a necessity, and in each form, there's different people who are really good at one and not the other, and vice versa. Like, theater is my background. Like, it's really interesting. Like, I'll use two players that I imagine most people know because I don't want to bore people and they go like, I don't know play, shut up, go back to comics. Um, but you know, like Arthur Miller, so Death of a Salesman, because most people probably had to read that in school, versus like Tennessee Williams and like Glass Menagerie. Arthur Miller is not great with language. His characters are fine, but I wouldn't say like they're groundbreaking. But he's insanely good at plot and structure. He's so good at it that like 5 of his plays are some of the greatest plays that have ever been written. Now the flip side of it is like Tennessee Williams. If you read Glass Menagerie, like the first act is all these short scenes, and then the second act is like a 30-minute long date between 2 minor characters. Not good at structure, like not how you're supposed to structure something. And it's one of the most popular plays of all time, Glass Menagerie, because he's better than almost everybody else with language and character. So like it takes him being better than almost everyone in the world at those two things to overcome the plot structure being messy.
Right.
Where Miller, nowhere near Tennessee Williams in character or language, but his plots are so incredibly good that the trajectory is just as high.
Right.
Plot. Sorry,
I absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely, you know, that's true in comics too. I mean, I don't want to bore people with naming, you know, 6 or 7 different comic books that are, you know, I would have to say that one of the guys who's just strong. We had talked earlier because we were talking to Robert Geronimo about guys who write and draw, like Mike Grell. For me, I was a fan of his when I was a kid. I really liked his art. He did a lot of high fantasy stuff. And he wrote them, and his stories were solid, and the art was so good it kind of carried through all the time. And he actually had some writing peaks, like the Longbow and stuff like that. But when you're having to collaborate, talk about that a little bit, because I think you've been very successful at the collaboration part in comics between you and the artist. Like I said, I was talking to Geronimo. We were talking about guys who could do both, which I'm a big fan of Robert Geronimo's work, being able to do both. But the difference is when you have to collaborate. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really good at getting to work with 2 of the best artists in all of comics. I guess that's an amazing skill of mine. I don't know, man. I was listening to a podcast with Don Cheadle earlier, and he was talking about what makes a great director, and he was like, who they cast. Right?
Yeah.
Casting is like one of the major things that makes a director seem great. And I think I was very lucky, but also had good gut instincts. Caitlin Yarsky and Hayden Sherman are 2 absolutely different artists, like in their styles, but are both uniquely amazing. And I think it's basically like universally agreed from critics and whatnot that their work is both like
incredible. If they can hang around and stay in comics, they're gonna be rock stars.
Yeah, without question. I found both of them on a Boom, a Facebook page that Boom Comics used to have. I think they had it so people wouldn't bother them at cons. Like it was basically the Boom Comics artist submission page on Facebook, and they would just say like, hey, just drop your portfolios here. So there was just like thousands of portfolios. So like when I was doing Saints at Image, I had a conversation with Eric Stevenson, who's the editor-in-chief, and I was like, I'm having such a good time on Saints. Like I want to do another book. Like I'm in now. I'm part of the Image family. So give me one of your artists. And Eric was just like, we don't do that. Like, go to DeviantArt. Like, I remember being dumbfounded, and then going to DeviantArt and going like, I have no idea how to find. It's just you get overwhelmed. There's just so much. And so, but I had these 2 ideas. I had the idea for The Few, and I had the idea for Coyotes already. And so I went to that Boom page, and I just scrolled. I spent a couple of nights in a row, just spending all night scrolling through portfolios. And I found Hayden's work first. I found a bunch of these like really cool, like assassin cityscape drawings he had done. And I immediately was like, not only did I know I wanted him to write The Few, but I was like, I'm changing a ton of this to fit his art.
Yeah.
like having seen his art, I was like, I got to go back in and like, there's a style and an energy to what he's doing that I'm going to fit my writing to what he's doing. And then 2 days later, I found Caitlin's art on the same Facebook page, and her art is really different.
Yeah.
Like,
Hers like more like a fine art. She's more like a fine artist.
yeah, absolutely. You know, her faces and especially the eyes um, are just so, there's such depth and reality to them. Like, she can convey a lot of emotion with a close up on a panel in a way that a lot of artists can't. He can create energy between the panels that most artists can't. Like, it feels like a movie. It actually feels like it's moving.
Yeah.
So
Very like Kirby could create that energy, but
yeah,
I think I'm more partial to Hayden's style. I was never a
yeah,
Kirby fan, but I did recognize how good Kirby was. I just didn't. I wasn't a fan of the art.
yeah. I mean, I think I've grown to like Kirby much more as I've gotten older. But I think also like I I mean, Hayden's work looks very much like Ronin and Sin City era Frank Miller.
Early Frank Miller, yeah,
there's a scratchiness, and like like Metal Gear Solid is another like look that I think Hayden's drawings are very much like. So I think what I've been successful to really answer your question, I'm only getting to that like 10 minutes into responding, but um I think coming from theater is all about collaborating and going like, no one in this room is the boss, and we're gonna look for what's the best idea. When theater's good, that's what it is. It's not always like that, but when it's really good, that's what it is. If the actor has the best idea, we're implementing it. If the director does, fantastic, he can keep his job. If the stage manager does, we're gonna steal it. You know, like any of that.
yeah.
And so with them, I just kind of was like, I approached them right off the bat, and I was like, how do you want to work on the book? How do you want the scripts to look? Instead of like, we don't have to do it any way that we've been told to do it. I'll write you a script that you think will get the most out of you. And I collaborated with them talking about stories and pages before we even started like laying stuff down. And then I stayed out of their way. Like,
The amazing thing was the paneling. Like I don't know how from stills that I mean, you pick people that were. I mean, there's a lot of people in comics today who are great artists but can't tell a story.
yeah,
This is kind of the theme I've been kind of running through with everybody is that it is a collaboration, unless of course you're doing it yourself. The artist tells a good portion of the story, and
yeah,
if the writer's not getting out of the artist's way, or the artist doesn't know how to tell that story, just to know anatomy and to know how to put together, perspective doesn't tell the story. It's more than that, and it's like the energy that Hayden creates or the emotion that Caitlin creates, and then
yeah. Well, I think a lot of artists, I think a lot of writers can sometimes get caught up because I'll hear conversations sometimes and I feel very much an outcast because there'll be a level of like, sometimes there's a weird animosity or tension between writers and artists. Like I think with people maybe who've been working for a long time or have done a lot of freelance where people are coming in and out, and there's a level of like, well, I'm the writer, so I'm in charge of the book, or I'm the artist, I'm doing the most work on the book, so
right.
I should get more credit. And there's this battle, and I don't know who's right or wrong. I don't want I know I guess I just don't have an interest in that. I just want to make a good
You
book.
want to make a good book, right? That's what
Well,
that's what your customer wants, right? That's what the public wants.
it's what the public wants, but also for myself. Like I like having books on my shelf and I'm like, I think that thing's cool.
Yeah.
Like I think that's an awesome book. Um, and I think the way I look at it then is I'm like, well, let's take hierarchy out of it. Like I'm not your boss. I'm not the showrunner, like we're running a TV show. And you're not my boss, but we're making a thing together, right? This is a marriage. We're going to throw things back and forth. People like to compare it to film a lot of the times, and I think they cut it short because without question, the artist on a book is not only the cinematographer but the director, right? Like they're directing all the action, they're telling the actors where to go, they're making the decisions within the moment of creation. The writer obviously is the screenwriter. In a lot of my relationships, I also kind of work as the editor and or producer, right? Like I'll handle a lot of the business side of things or the interactions directly with Image or other publisher. But also as an editor, like I might go back after seeing the book and or like seeing the thumbnails or anything and going like, we actually need a double page spread here that's going to do this and this, or we need to go back even an issue before that we have in the can and drop these four things in because the thing that you did in issue 5 was awesome, but it's not going to play if we don't plant it.
Right.
Right? It's giving freedom. So there's times where like Kate or Hayden will turn around there, they'll be like, "Hey, I was drawing this thing. It's really cool. It made me think about the character, and it really makes them more in depth. Like we should give them this amulet, or like we've never used an amulet, so it's a fake example. But I'll be like, we should use this amulet, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I don't want to just introduce it. So like, I either need to change text or we need to do something visually that plants it for the audience, so that when it shows up, it feels like it was always
Right.
there.
Right.
Um,
One of the things
so
we've talked about this before. One of the things I missed when I was growing up was they used to put in comics, see issue such and such. When something would show up on a page and you're going, where do they get this? It was planted in issue 2. If you haven't been reading all of them, or if you missed it, that's where you got to go back to find it. And then you know it's not just appeared. At least then you
right,
can let your mind like accept it. I was
yeah.
very sad that they got rid of all that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things. I mean, we've talked about it better from old comics that I miss. I honestly, I'm probably a dinosaur, but I miss the thought bubbles.
Oh man, we've had this conversation for hours.
I like
I love the.
bubbles.
I'm a Swamp Thing fan, so Thought Bubbles was my life. You know.
I mean, the only thing I can imagine is I know they fell out of style and they became narration boxes, which I think was like, part of me wonders, like, I don't know if this is true, but my gut at times tells me that the thought bubbles were like too kiddie, like too little kiddish.
Maybe they
And then
thought so, but I
the
don't read
narration,
all the boxes, by the way.
oh my God.
Too
Don't
many
tell me.
boxes. I don't read them. That's too much. Too many words.
You narrate. Would you read them if they were in a thought bubble?
Yeah. Yes.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
I wonder,
Absolutely.
how many people would have that. There's,
Narration for me, I usually think that narration is telling me what the artist drew. It's dark tonight. It's dark and stormy. No, the artist already took care of that.
that's bad narration.
Yeah, they do that a lot. They did that a lot in Batman in the 90s and into the 2000s before
I mean,
they had a renaissance.
that,
But
I mean, that's bad narration in all storytelling. I mean, a movie, like you'd lose your mind in a movie if they did that. If it was raining and like you heard a voiceover and they're like, it was raining that night. You're like, yeah, I get it. Oh.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you got on the pipeline. Like, so we know that Saints has been out for a while. That it's in trade paperback. Has it gone out of print?
It's close. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I know there's not a physical copy of it left in the warehouse.
Okay.
So yeah, I think whatever's in stores and hasn't been bought yet is probably pretty close to being it.
All right. And then we have Coyotes is in print and in trade, two separate trades. Is there any talk of being an omnibus where you get the whole thing in one?
I don't know. I mean, those would probably have to be conversations I would have to initiate. I no.
No. Okay. So they're still available. I know the Few is currently still in print and still available.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't mention your other works, but are they available in
Yeah, I think almost everything I've done has been recent enough. It's all in like within the last 5 years that I think that
Paul at least gone to trade?
yeah.
Let us know a little bit about what's in the pipeline for you. What do you got going on?
Sure. I'm doing a bunch of freelance. I'm trying to think how much I'm allowed to say about it. It's always confusing. So like I'm working at an indie publisher, I'm working at a non-indie publisher, and then Bliss is coming out in which is my next book with Caitlin Yarsky, comes out July 22nd. So
Well, that's
we
exciting.
are,
Give us a little bit more about that. Tell us about Bliss. It's we're going to be on the July 17th, so it comes out the 22nd, right? So
yeah.
5 days from today, everybody can run out to your local comic shop and grab yourself a copy.
Yeah, it's been it became a more personal book than I wanted or expected, but that's been kind of a good thing. Like I think I think Caitlin's art is just insane in it. Like I think personally it's Eisner level work what she's doing. I don't even know if people are going to realize she makes it so seamless what she's doing. I do not think people are going to notice actually how good it is. I worry
Dude,
sometimes.
page 2, the crowd scene, the
Crowd
angry
scene. It's insane.
it
It's
blows
insane.
me away. Like that's George Perez level.
It's
There's
insane.
like 600
Easy.
characters there, and then
Faces. Like
faces. Yeah, not like shadows. She didn't go
no,
away with like do the whole shadow thing, and then like from the perspective you're in, you have the one angry guy pointing at the top.
right in front of
Oh,
you. Like literally like right here. Like it's amazing. Basically, at its core, Bliss is about again, it started like we started talked about storytelling, it started from concept, which was basically we were thinking about guilt and shame and how people do horrible things and can sleep at night and live with themselves. And we were like, well, what if there was a drug that all of these people took that wiped away the memory of the bad stuff they did? If it struck that memory that gave them shame. So they never really thought about the fact of them foreclosing on houses or stealing money from dead people in nursery homes and whatever. And but at its core, once you get past that, the core is really a father-son dynamic. There's a son who's very sick, and his dad doesn't know how to pay for him, and he literally makes a deal with a couple of devils where he will be the one who protects their drug, which is this drug Bliss. And as we get deeper in it, we realize that he's dealing with gods, and one of them is the goddess Leth, who is the Greek goddess of oblivion, of forgetting your memory, of forgetfulness. But it gets a lot into like what makes a good person, what makes a good father, what makes a bad person, what makes a bad father. Do we have to remember things if we want to progress and move on, or do we only progress and move on as a society if we forget things? So it has those kind of discourses and arguments going on within it.
yeah, wow, sounds amazing. I got to read the first issue, and I thought it was amazing. So it's
Yeah,
much appreciated.
critics have been really kind to us. Like our advanced reviews have been like mail home to mom level
Yeah,
reviews. It's
people
nice.
love me. See,
Yeah,
people.
mom, see, mom, they like the picture book.
So, is there anything else you can tell us about what you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things going on in film and television. With some of the book, with some things I've worked on. They may be some things that have been mentioned. And then yeah, comics have been really good to me. I'm working on a couple of things right now with some artists and some companies that have been really really exciting. I'm doing a new book with Hayden Sherman. I can talk about that.
Yeah,
Who I worked on The Few and Thumbs with, and that has been one of the most fun books I've ever worked on. After
yeah.
Bliss, I think we were after Bliss and Thumbs back to back. Hayden and I were both just like, I think we need to laugh and have just like an angry cowboy and like a talking vulture. And,
Yeah, that sounds great. The So Bliss comes out on the 22nd. You have another book with Hayden coming out probably end of year, beginning of next,
yeah, I think
somewhere in that neighborhood.
hopefully no later than the beginning of 2021.
Okay. So, and you've been coronavirus hasn't stopped you. You've been steadily working.
I'm a writer. I mean, I don't leave the house already. So,
How is
like,
it any different, right?
well, no, like people, I got together. I have a young son, so like I got together with one of his friends and dad to do some social distance biking,
Yeah.
and his dad, the friend's dad, was asking me. He was just like, what's it like? How are you how are you handling it? And I'm like, I used to write for 4 hours a day. Now I write for three. Like, I mean, it's not that. My son's home more, but that's actually been nice. I feel bad. I feel like I'm letting people down because lots of people are turning to me and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. Like I'm going crazy. Are you going crazy? And I'm like, it's been nice. I'm not teaching right now. I'm at home. My kids having fun. I mean, my wife disagrees. She's one of the people who's like, I'm going crazy. So um, yeah. So no, it hasn't affected me or my work that much.
So let all the convention people know how they can get a hold of you or get in touch with you on all the social media.
Sure. I basically at Sean Chris Lewis is my Twitter, and my Instagram. Clearly, I use a lot is at Sean Lewis 6026. I put a lot of thought into into that name.
Yeah, they'll
So
find you. They'll find you real easy with that one. Oh, one thing we didn't mention is that this com is possible to like it can be around the world, but your books are also in France right
Yeah.
now, right? Coyotes and The Few are both printed
Yeah.
by High Comics.
High Comics in France. Shout out to Sullivan Raoult, who's an amazing publisher and has been doing my work out there. I think Thumbs is also going to come out in France through them.
Oh, fantastic.
And possibly Bliss as well. They've been amazing, and it's been really cool. Every like Coyotes, the second volume of Coyotes just came out in France. So it's awesome. Some mornings I wake up and I literally have like 40 alerts from France, all in French, telling me that they either love or hate my book. It's the best thing to wake up to ever, because I'm kind of like, wow, I don't know what anyone's saying, but this is awesome. So yeah, if you speak French, though, their volumes are gorgeous because they're all hardcover bound.
Yeah.
They do them in a really beautiful, specific way that I just, fantastic.
All right. So we really appreciate you coming out and giving us your time during the coronavirus, which we're all coming out of here soon. So yeah,
keep in Florida.
Yeah. Keep in touch and be well, brother.
You too, man. Take care.